Hello everyone, my name is Sam Schelfhout. I'm a PhD candidate in Physical Culture and Sports Studies at the University of Texas at Austin, and I'm very excited to be presenting at the 2020 Yokohama Sport Conference on this thematic symposia on the development and spread of a global phenomenon, esports. And today I'll be talking about assessing underrepresentation and harassment of girls and women in esports. So there has been an increasing amount of attention that has been given to video games and esports as vehicles of sexism and harassment in the 21st century. This presentation will examine the position of girls and women in the historically hegemonic masculine spaces of esports. Gaming communities in the game industry are often hostile to women, fraught with stereotypes, sexism, and harassment. Following an analysis on the theoretical foundations underpinning gender disparity in video games and esports, this presentation investigates the inherently gendered organizations that currently dominate the esports scene and why girls and women struggle to enter these spaces. The discussion will then shift to the perception of women in competitive gaming and esports and the harassment, misogyny, and sexism that many girls and women experience both online, and in person. I will conclude by noting the efforts made by individuals and small organizations to combat harassment and exclusion, as well as introduce the voices of women who play Hearthstone, who describe their experiences competing in esports tournaments. So gaming and esports have been characteristically perceived as male bonding spaces. Several factors have contributed to the rise of this culture, stemming from the male-dominated arcade game culture in the 1980s to the deliberate marketing of video games to the target audience of young males in the 1990s. Playing video games with other males in arcade settings has introduced a social element that allows for closer interpersonal relationships. These opportunities to bond may reinforce masculine norms in the video game setting and the promotion of the in-group, which is males, that may continue to demean or isolate the out-group, which would be females. The association between males and gaming has dominated perceptions of video games and esports over the past few decades. The persistence of the male gamer stereotype and the connotation of boys and men to video games can be explained in part by gender role theory, which suggests that individuals internalize these cultural expectations about their gender because social pressures external to the individual favor behavior consistent with the prescribed gender role. Gender role theory envisages the role of women to be supportive and caring, while avoiding any activities that may be portrayed as masculine, including video games and esports. Historically, studies in the social science fields reported that girls and young women display less interest in digital games, have less game-related knowledge, and play less frequently and for shorter durations than do boys and young men. These gendered behavioral patterns contribute to a self-fulfilling cycle where less girls and women are attracted to playing video games, which leads to them being less experienced or worse performing compared to boys and men. This reinforces the stereotype that males perform better at video games than women, which results in a decreased competence, beliefs, motivation, and performance for women. Gender disparity in esports and video games persists even as the number of girls and women playing video games increases. Despite the wide gender gap in competitive video games and esports, women represent a sizable part of the gamer demographic. In a realm traditionally dominated by males, girls and women are increasingly straying from gender role theory when it comes to video games as they close the slight gap between themselves and male gamers. Women's increased presence in gaming and esports has not been enthusiastically embraced by gaming communities. They are still perceived as minorities with different or inferior game-related motivation, expertise, level of participation, preferences, and genre choice than male players. Like traditional sports, the secondary role of women is well established in competitive gaming and esports. Examples such as cheerleaders and cover girls on issues of Sports Illustrated are mimicked at live events and other competitive gaming events, such as booth babes, who are women who are hired to wear scantily clad clothing to promote games or products. This sexualization of women reinforces a societal hierarchy that places men over women, reducing women's interest in involving themselves in gaming. Girl gamers celebrate this dissolution of stereotypes surrounding gender role theory and are embracing gaming as a primary facet of their personalities. However, when girls and women reveal their sex in in-game settings, their legitimacy and competence will be questioned. If a female player oversteps her boundaries and asserts herself, the theory predicts that the player will be socially punished for violating these expectations. Viewing gaming as a male space leads to the marginalization of girls and women as others, subjecting them to alienation, persecution, and in some cases, harassment and abuse. All aspiring esports players share the drive, focus, and passion that is clearly visible in varying competitive scenes, from neighborhood tournaments to international tournaments. Boys, girls, men, and women enter competitive gaming with exceptional focus to strive for greatness. However, apprehension towards women's participation in the pursuit is evident. While the disconnect between male identity and gamer identity has been lessened because of both the rising popularity of video games and the accrual of social capital with other males, the same conflict has not softened for women in gaming. So why do girls and women fail to break through the male-dominated atmosphere of gaming and esports? While men have the privilege of incorporating both their gendered identity and their gamer identity in gaming spaces, women experience the opposite. Because their gendered identity conflicts with their gamer identity, women may be less likely to describe themselves in terms of the gamer stereotype. The reinforcement of the stereotype results in gaming appearing less interesting for girls and women. While esports environments discourage female participation, it should not be assumed that girls and women have cast aside video games as a competitive pursuit. Women who participate in esports frequently must choose between embodying either their gamer identity or gender identity, but harnessing both simultaneously may come at a social cost. In Witkowski's in-depth analysis in gendered frames surrounding participation in esports, she finds that for many girl gamers, being visible as expert players is in tension with erasing parts of oneself, such as dismissing aspects of voice, identity, and outlook, in order to persist normally in their leisure space. This is evident in her interview with a girl gamer by the alias Excellent, who is described as an MMORPG player whose everyday team status is temporarily rearranged. This is because her expertise is not based on her skill at a certain role, but rather her proficiency is stated as her gender, where girl is a singular marker of gender being done at all in such an expert team. While the stereotype of females as being less adept at gaming than males exists, gender disparity in gaming may result from cultural perceptions of gender in gaming rather than the actual differences in ability or performance. This is evident in the selection of team roles in both first-person shooters and MOBA games, as researchers found that women who played League of Legends may face a vicious cycle by believing that they are suitable only for support or healing roles because more problematically they do not belong in the game. Because of this, gamer girls or girl gamers may refrain from intensive play and or experimentation with other game roles, limiting the possibilities of play and limiting their competitive potential. Risks are measured cautiously due to the backlash girls and women could receive in the forms of degradation or harassment. The marginalization of girls and women in video game culture leads to scenarios regarding how this outsider group is treated if they occupy the space. The perception of the male gamer stereotype as oppressive or cruel not only contributes to girls' and women's feelings of animosity, but could also have the direct negative psychological effects of verbal and sexual harassment directed at women, including rape and death threats. While harassment directed at female game players is no secret among gamers, it has only recently become a part of a larger public discourse. By incorporating efforts to reduce harassment, this will encourage more girls and women to both play video games and to enter the game industry. Promoting opportunities for these women is important given the fact that many women have experienced sexism working in the video game industry. According to one pair of researchers, 60% of women surveyed experienced sexism or harassment in the video game industry. 77% of women as well as 55% of men know a woman working in the video game industry who has experienced sexism. Efforts must be made to reduce harassment and sexism in competitive gaming and esports. Until there is widespread acknowledgement that women are persistently abused by such treatment, progress to stop it will be stifled. The Gamergate controversy is commonly referenced as a focusing event to the awareness of harassment of girls and women in video games. The reverberations stemming from the controversy have persisted in how women are treated in competitive gaming and esports in the present day. Harassment had certainly existed in gaming and the game industry well before the events of Gamergate transpired, but the cultural impact of the controversy placed the issue in the public eye. Gamergate is used as a blanket term for a harassment campaign targeted at several women working in the video game industry, including, but not limited to, Brianna Wu, Zoe Quinn, and Anita Sarkeesian, who are pictured on this slide. From the perspective of feminist scholars such as Gray et al., Gamergate was a movement that focused on men's anxieties over losing ground in a once homogeneous universe. No matter the framing, the rallying point emerged in retaliation to the recent increase in feminist critiques of video games and gaming culture. Harassment is identified as a form of deviance, which is defined as actions and behaviors that violate social norms, both formal and informal. One reason why deviance is commonly seen in online spaces is because of the anonymity harassers possess. The concealment of their identities on the internet disinhibits people. Feeling relatively safe in their real-world identity hidden, people say and do things they otherwise would not normally say or do in their own face-to-face world. Environments that ensure anonymity lead to negative behaviors such as trash talking and flaming. Gamers, both casual and professional, may experience trash talk while gaming, but it often becomes more virulent when the targeted player does not possess the characteristics of a traditional gamer. One incident that exemplifies this notion occurred in 2016 when Kim Giguri-Seyan, a Chinese Overwatch player who now plays for the Overwatch League Shanghai Dragons, was accused of cheating following her performance in a tournament setting. Suspicion arose when she displayed superior technical ability, showing such exemplary mouse precision that viewers believed that she was using an aimbot, which is a computer game bot used to provide varying levels of automated target acquisition and calibration to the player. In response to these allegations, Giguri live-streamed her play within a monitored studio setting with one view showing the gameplay screen and a camera placed behind her physical self to capture the movements she made with her mouse. Having to legitimize her play through livestream for male approval resulted in alternative forms of harassment, which included attacks on her appearance. In 2019, I published a paper along with my co-authors, Matt Bowers and Andrew Howe, focusing on the experience of Wang Baisa Xingyu, a former professional Hearthstone player from China. Her entry into the 2017 Hearthstone Championship Tour Summer Championship in Los Angeles marked the first time that a woman was selected to compete in a Hearthstone World event in the game's short 3-year history. The media strategy to play up her gender throughout the broadcast was recognized immediately by fans and required a repudiation of intent to novelize Baisa's inclusion in the tournament. Despite this disassociation from the fact that gender was a topic throughout the broadcast, Baisa would receive different treatment than that from her male opponents. The first of 2 pre-recorded interviews with Baisa that were broadcast during the match largely focused on her experience competing in Hearthstone as a woman. Baisa noted that tournaments were also largely focused on her gender instead of her preparation strategies. In conversation with the authors, she explains, "They were always asking what I thought of the situation as a female contestant. They asked these kinds of questions for more than 2 years. Every single time, my answers changed very little." Baisa's second pre-recorded interview, aired in her elimination match versus Changhyun Kokosasa Kim, a male player from South Korea, highlights the discrepancy between the questions that Blizzard Entertainment, the producer of Hearthstone, geared towards male and female players. This table on this slide shows the questions presented to Baisa and Kokosasa in separate interviews. In assessing the disparate coverage, first, the questions presented to Kokosasa were employed to give viewers deeper insights into his skills as a player, whereas those presented to Baisa, the female competitor, shifted attention away from her skill, in one example, asking what other activities she enjoyed outside of Hearthstone. In addition, the third question, "Who is your favorite Hearthstone player?" focused on players other than herself, deflecting attention away from her own skill and to her male peers. In conversation with Baisa, she hopes that she can be a positive influence on other female gamers who wish to get involved in the competitive Hearthstone scene. Opposite in her belief that hobbies such as Hearthstone should not be filtered as male and female activities, Baisa hopes that all women could be able to choose what they truly like and do not have to hesitate because this or that very thing is not feminine enough. Other female Hearthstone players, such as competitive player and streamer Slissa, are aware of the duality of wanting to be recognized as a legitimate player regardless of gender while also positively representing women as minority gamers. She notes that, quote, "We as women can and do play at the same level as men, so we want to be treated as such. At the same time, there are way less women in the field, so being a positive role model is important in getting more women into esports. Streamer Mackenzie's sums this up sentiment by saying, quote, "We are all players who love the same game, and I truly believe people treat you the way you let them. Anyone who lets sex separate one player from another is distracted and will ultimately fail in the long run. Those who keep players' priorities in check will flourish." Former caster and now Hearthstone developer Cora Georgiou observes that you can go to any Twitch chat when a woman is playing during DreamHack or in an HCT tour stop and you'll see a similar situation. Quote, "I don't believe the Hearthstone community is different from other esports in any way when it comes to sexism, but in general, women in Hearthstone have to try much harder to be perceived well. Women today are more visible in gaming culture and the number of female gamers is increasing, but this does not mean that we should stop talking about gender in games. Mounting evidence proves that digital gaming can be greatly rewarding for many players, not only as a pleasurable and sociable leisure activity, but as a pathway towards positive interpersonal, vocational, and educational outcomes. The potential benefits of providing a more inclusive space for men, women, and non-binary people appear to be a worthy goal." Georgiou sums up female participation in Hearthstone by concluding, quote, "It's important to note that when a woman performs well, but then tries not to make it a focal point, acknowledge it and then move on to focus their performance as a player, host, or caster. Eventually, maybe we won't even have to acknowledge it at all," end quote. Faiza has memories of a positive experience competing in Los Angeles at the 2017 Hearthstone Championship Tour Summer Championship, voicing her hopes for the future that everyone competes on merits and skills and enjoys the pleasure brought by games. She notes that, "I hope I can be a trailblazer for future female players and see to it that they encounter fewer unpleasant incidents. I hope that the trees I have planted can provide shade for the newcomers." So there are approaches discussed to reducing harassment for women in esports. One approach to improve spaces is to improve the infrastructures of the games themselves. One scholar suggests that reporting systems should be more efficient and moderators should be less tolerant of sexist, racist, homophobic, and otherwise discriminatory language that reinforces hostility and aggression towards outsiders. Consequences for offending players must be consistent and reflective of the fact that the deviant behavior is unacceptable, giving victims of hostility a sense of agency in hopes of building a safer space. Several independent organizations and communities have been established with missions to improve inclusivity and reduce harassment in online gaming. For example, AnyKey is an advocacy group that supports and seeks to sustainably increase diversity, inclusion, and equity in competitive gaming. At the core of its organization is the Good Luck Have Fun Pledge, which initiates gamers from all backgrounds to commit to central tenets of its mission, which include being a good sport regardless of winning or losing, and speaking up against discrimination, hate speech, harassment, and abuse. As of this writing, over 500,000 gamers have signed this pledge. Groups for individual titles also boast thriving communities, such as the Badass Women of Hearthstone, which hosts female-only leagues and tournaments to promote participation by girls and women in that game. Segregated tournaments have also been posed as a solution to garner female interest in esports, and major tournaments have been conducted with varying results and opinions. The benefit to such tournaments is removing the reluctance of entering male-dominated cross-gender challenges without having to brazenly feature gender identities. In December 2018, the World Showdown of Esports hosted an all-women Hearthstone tournament featuring 16 pro and amateur players. The event exceeded expectations, and Jaya D, a Filipina Hearthstone caster, took home the title. Following the tournament, she praised the existence of an event that featured all women. She said, "There are a lot of talented women players in Hearthstone, and it's great that we have this kind of event that was marketed so well and done so well, because it's kind of a sensitive topic. These tournaments possess the ability to foster a community and highlight women's abilities to compete at all levels of competition. Structures that promote greater opportunities for women to compete could signal the rise of female participation and retention." So I want to conclude by saying that gaming communities and the game industry remain hostile to women, fraught with gender stereotypes, sexism, and harassment. Online gaming and esports can be greatly rewarding for many players, And gender disparity cannot be ignored as the game industry and esports continue to accelerate. As journalist Ferguson Mitchell stresses, diversity is no longer just a feel-good issue, it's just good business. For gaming environments, measures must be taken to ensure a safer space for women and other minorities, and several scholars have proposed initiatives that could be undertaken to improve these environments. I want to thank you for listening to this presentation, and I look forward to engaging with y'all at this conference. Thank you.